Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing one of the most well-known Guyanese rotis, and that is for Sada Roti or Seke Roti. Now, there's no shortage of different types of rotis in Guyana, Trinidad, as well as other Caribbean countries. I'm slowly getting there. I'm going to end up showing all of the different types of rotis that I grew up eating. This is just one of them, and it happens to be one of the most simple. So, Sada Roti sometimes can prove to be a little tricky for some people, but I promise if you guys follow all of these simple steps in this video, your Sada Rotis are going to be perfect. So I want to give a big shout out to the Desi Imports for providing me with all of the ingredients that I needed to make my roti today. It's going to be a great video, guys. I hope you enjoy. The ingredients that I'm going to need for my Sada Roti today are very simple. All you're going to need is some all-purpose flour, some baking powder, some water, as well as a little pinch of salt. I went ahead and I put all of my flour into my bowl. I'm going to go in with all of my baking powder. Now the ratio of baking powder to flour that I use is half a tablespoon of baking powder per cup of flour. And I'm also going to go in there with a nice little pinch of salt. The salt actually helps to keep the Sada Rotis a little softer, especially if you wanted to keep it in the fridge for a few days. It's going to keep a lot better with that salt. The reason is because it doesn't have that oil like oil roti has to fall back on and make it nice and soft. So the salt is going to help that a little bit. Once you've added in all of your baking powder and your salt, you're just going to want to mix it all into that flour and get it nice and incorporated. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to start adding in our water a little bit at a time. You want to make this a soft dough. I would say a little softer than if you were making oil roti, because the Sada Rotis need to be soft when they come off of the stove. You do not want them to be tough. So if you mix the dough too hard, then they're going to be tough. And you want to try to use warm water for this, because if you were to use cold water, the rotis can end up being tough as well. So I'm going to keep on adding water until I get a nice soft dough, and I'm going to come back and show you guys what that looks like. I added in enough water to make a nice soft dough, and I wanted to mention that while you're mixing your Sada Roti, or any type of roti for that matter, you do not want to knead it onto itself like that, or else the rotis can end up getting tough. What you want to do is just go ahead and mash it down like this. You can mash it down, and then you can gather it up, and then mash it down again. As you guys can see, the dough is a little sticky in my hand, but as I knead it like this for a little while, it's going to take about 5 minutes, then it's going to get nice and soft, and it's not going to be sticky. If it's really sticky, then you might want to dust a little bit of flour on it, but you do not want to keep adding too much flour, or else your roti can get tough. Sada Roti can be a little tricky to make, so you want to make sure to take all of these little precautions, so this way you get a nice soft Sada Roti. So this is the technique that I use when I'm kneading my Sada Roti dough. I go ahead and I mash it down with my knuckles, and then I just gather around the sides, flip it over, and I do the same. And you want to keep doing this until the dough gets nice and smooth on the outside and it's no longer sticking to your hands. This is sort of similar to how you would knead puri dough. You want to make sure to get it nice and smooth, because just like with the puri and the Sada Roti, you want to get a nice soft product in the end. So this is what my Sada Roti dough looks like after about 5 minutes of kneading. As you guys can see, it's no longer sticking to my hand, and it's nice and smooth at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on my countertop. I'm going to cover it with a damp paper towel just so it doesn't dry out on the top. And I'm going to leave it to rest for about 15 to 20 minutes just so those glutens in the flour can rest a little bit. And once that's done, I'm going to come back and show you guys what we do next. Once your dough has rested for that 15 minutes, you're going to start portioning them into little balls. And I wanted to show you guys how you get the tops nice and smooth. So what you want to do is you want to take one portion of your dough, and you're going to take the palm of your one hand as well as your fingers in the other hand, and you're just going to go ahead and roll the dough onto itself. So you want to grab with your palm and your fingers like that, and then you want to roll it over on itself. Now what you're actually doing here, other than getting the top nice and smooth, is you're sealing the roti, so this way it can puff up on the tawa. Now as you guys know, whenever you're eating Sada Roti, it has that big air pocket in the middle, almost like if you were eating a pita. So what you want to do is make sure to seal it really well, so this way it can puff up on your tawa. So I'm done folding it in on itself. The top is nice and smooth, but you're going to see that it has that at the bottom. So what you want to do is you want to start to close it up. And by closing this up, you're going to have it puff up nice on the tawa. So you're really using your thumb and your second finger to do this, and you just want to get the bottom as smooth as possible as well, and seal those little edges. Once you've portioned and smoothed out all of your dough balls, it's time to put a damp paper towel over the top of them and let them rest for another 15 to 20 minutes, so this way the glutens can rest in them a little bit and we can have really soft rotis when they're done. Once your dough balls have rested for about 15 minutes, it's time to start cooking your rotis. So I took one of my dough balls and I have it on my board here and I floured it really well. I also have my tawa heating up on a medium heat. You want to keep it on a medium heat to a low heat throughout the whole cooking process because you don't want these to burn or bubble up too fast. So I'm going to show you guys that step when we get to it, but in the meantime, let's start rolling out the roti. So what you want to do is you want to coat it in flour and then you're going to press it out a little bit and flatten it. And then you want to go ahead and get your rolling pin and start rolling it. Now you want to get this roti rolled out as evenly as possible because with Sada Roti, if you roll it unevenly, then it's not going to puff up in the pan or the tawa. So you're going to roll it out until you get your desired thickness. Now you should not roll Sada Roti too thin. I know people like roti on the thinner side, but if you roll the Sada Roti too thin, then what's going to happen is it's not going to puff up. So you want to make sure to get the edges. So when I roll, I do like a circular motion and I get all the edges instead of just getting the middle and letting it get too thin. And I'm going to be very honest with you guys, not every single Sada Roti is going to puff up. Just being honest here, it just doesn't happen unless you're like a seasoned pro. And only recently did I get all of my Sada Rotis to swell up, and it's only sometimes that happens. So I got my Sada Roti to my desired thickness. It's not too thin nor is it too thick. I would say it has about like 1/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it on the tawa when it comes up to temperature. I just placed my roti on the hot tawa, and after about 10 to 15 seconds, you're going to see that it starts to bubble up. What you're going to want to do is flip it. Remember I said you don't want it to bubble up too much when you put it on the tawa. Then what you're going to do as soon as you flip it is you want to start rotating the roti. You do not want it to sit on the tawa by itself too long because if it does, it can get unevenly brown and it might not swell up. You just want to keep turning it, rotating it with your fingers. And if you wanted to, you could use a spatula to flip this, and you could use a tea towel to go ahead and rotate instead of using your fingers. As you guys can see, it's starting to puff up very nicely on the sides. I don't know if you guys can see those bubbles. Remember I said I have my heat on a medium heat. You don't want it to be on a high heat or else it's going to get too dark and it won't swell up. After about 30 seconds of rotating on this side, I'm going to go ahead and flip my roti over, and it's got a beautiful golden brown color. So what I'm going to do before the bottom part gets too dark is I'm going to seke the roti or start to puff up that roti. So you have a few choices. You can put this in the microwave for about 20 to 30 seconds or just until it starts to puff up, or you can go ahead and put it directly on your gas flame. But since I have an electric stove, I'm going to show you what I do. Since I have an electric stove, I cannot put my roti directly on the flame. So what I like to do is I like to get a little wire rack. I put it down on my element and I put it on a high heat. Then what you want to do is you want to take your roti and you're gently going to put it down and you're going to wait a few seconds for that roti to puff up. As you guys can see, it started to puff up already. You got to be a little patient and you have to do this on a high heat or else it won't raise. You also want to be careful because of that steam. So once it swells up, I'm going to take it off of the heat. So before I close out the video and show you guys the finished product, I wanted to show you guys another way that you can seke the roti or puff it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the microwave and I'm going to put it into the microwave and I'm going to show you guys what that looks like. I put my microwave on for 20 seconds and I put my roti in, and as you guys can see, it started to puff up beautifully and the whole thing has puffed up. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's puffing up beautifully. And that's what you're going to see. It's going to start to deflate. Another option for sekeing or puffing up that roti is if it starts to bubble up with big bubbles like this in the pan, you can go ahead and take one of these tea towels and just press down on the edge that it's puffing out at, and the whole thing will fill up with air. This way you don't even have to put it on the flame or in your microwave. And as you guys can see, it's going to puff up all the way. And then your roti would be done. Before I go, I wanted to show you guys how I would serve one of my Sada Rotis. So what I like to do is I like to cut my Sada Roti into 4. So I'm going to cut it up into 4 little sections. You don't even have to cut it up if you don't want to though. And once you cut it up, You guys can see those beautiful air pockets inside of the Sada Roti. And then you can go ahead and serve it with anything. Sada Roti is more of a breakfast item, but of course it could be eaten for lunch, it could be eaten for dinner, and it could be eaten alongside any type of dish. Breakfast dishes, vegetarian dishes, meat dishes. The possibilities are endless, guys. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this video for Sada Roti today. I hope I made it as simple as possible. I promise you guys, if you follow all of these simple steps, you're going to have the best tasting and the best texture Sada Roti ever. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Go ahead and give it a nice big thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so yet. And go ahead and leave us some comments down below and tell me what's your favorite thing to eat with Sada Roti and what you would like me to make next. I'll see you guys again in another one of my videos.